Once upon a time, there lived a great scientist called Charles Darwin. He traveled around the globe in a ship for 5 long years and spent 5 weeks of his trip on a group of islands called Galapagos. But Darwin was not alone during his travel. Darwin had with him his best friend, a friend who helped him remember every little thing he saw during his travel. And do you know who Darwin's best friend was? His best friend was a simple notebook. Yes, the notebook. The kind you can find in any small shop around the corner. The kind you carry to school. And in his notebook, Darwin drew pictures of the many things he saw and wrote down everything he observed. And after Darwin came home, he looked carefully into his notebook and voila! He told the world that all living beings are related to each other and that all living beings emerged from one single cell that lived billions of years ago. But Darwin was not the only scientist who kept a notebook. Marie Curie did, Albert Einstein did, and so did Leonardo da Vinci, to name a few. Of course, a notebook kept by a scientist is not called just a homework or classwork book. It is called a journal. Do you know why scientists write journals? To remember everything they observe and to record their ideas. And these journals help pass on their ideas to people born centuries later. Just like fairy tales are passed on, science is passed on too, by writing it down on a simple paper bound into a notebook, making the notebook a powerful scientific recording tool. But do you know how paper was made, or who first bound it into a notebook? Here's who. Welcome to the story of the scientific recording tool, the notebook. Long, long ago, even before the alphabets were invented, our nomadic ancestors could write. But they had neither alphabets nor the notebooks. So they just used cave walls as notebooks and pictures or symbols as alphabets, thus making cave walls the first notebook. But there was one problem with using cave walls as notebooks. They just could not be carried around. And this was becoming pretty difficult for people. So they just left the cave walls behind and started using other materials for writing. Ancient Chinese used tortoise shells or bone. Indians used palm leaves, and others used ivory or small stone slabs. And then came the clay tablets. People of the Indus Valley and the Sumerians or Mesopotamians all used clay tablets as notebooks. Clay tablets were easy to make and carry around. People simply dug up the clay from the riverbanks, patted it into a flat cake, and wrote on the wet mud with a pencil-like tool called the stylus. Some tablets were even made of wood or terracotta. These tablets were so popular that even schoolwork and homework was done on them. But they were mostly used to keep accounts or to write down history. In spite of clay tablets being popular, the Egyptians used something else to write on. The Egyptians used a longer and lighter paper-like writing material called the papyrus. Papyrus was made from the papyrus plant and was cheap and easy to make. But then it got damaged easily. It cracked up in dry weather and got damp in wet weather. Again, the writing material underwent change, and this time, instead of clay tablets or papyrus, animal skin called parchment, made especially from sheepskin, was used to write on, making parchment the new notebook. Parchment was cheaper and longer lasting than papyrus in any type of climate. Writing materials like papyrus and parchment were used for centuries until something similar to our current day paper came along. It was called the paper of Marcus Sai because it was invented by a Chinese official named Sai Lun. Before the invention of paper, Chinese wrote on either bamboo or silk. Now silk was expensive and bamboo was heavy. So Sai Lun, inspired by wasps and bees, came up with a new writing material made by crushing and pounding the bark of mulberry trees and mixed with hemp and rags and old fishing nets. The new material was called Z or paper. It was strong, cheap, light in weight, and was easy to make. Thus, Chinese invented and wrote on paper as early as 105th century AD, but they kept this process a secret for centuries. Slowly, centuries later, paper-making process spread to Korea, Japan, Tibet, etc. Arabs invented paper-making because they invaded China and they took slaves from China. From Arab countries, paper-making was learnt by Indian and Egyptian populations. And slowly, through the Silk Route, the paper-making secret of China spread around the world. Now, this paper became so popular that everybody started using it. Paper mills were set up across the world. Baghdad had its first paper mill built in 794 AD. Then came Europe, and Europe built its first paper factory in 1453 AD. Gutenberg printed Bible on paper around the same time. And a German man set up North America's first paper industry in 1690. Shahi Khan set up the paper industry in India as early as 1417 to 67 AD in Kashmir. And once paper mills were set up, paper became more available as a recording tool. Scientists, architects, engineers, explorers, and everybody else used it. notebooks were made at home by binding together sheafs of white paper and then drawing lines across by hand to make it a single ruled notebook. For all we know, Darwin must have used one of his own handmade white paper notebooks as his travel companion. Whatever be the case, notebooks underwent a lot of change after that. Legend goes that Thomas W. Hawley, a paper mill worker in North America, collected leftover scraps of paper during his free time and bound them together to make the first legal pad in 1888. And it is said that Edward Podosek made the first spiral notebook in 1924. Later on, everybody added their own bit of innovation to the notebook, and it came in various shapes like long, short, legal, single-ruled, blank, double-ruled, or even checkered to suit the needs of every individual who uses it. So next time you have a brilliant idea or observe something that is worth remembering and passing on, pick your scientific recording tool, the notebook or the journal, and write on. Because, as the old Chinese saying goes, the faintest ink is more powerful than the strongest memory. Thank you.